It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of America, and live from the WACA studios, this is Good Night. We begin tonight with an Oscar-nominated actor and ghost-busting master Bill Murray, and an apparent career change for the 69-year-old veteran star. During a podcast he was featured on, Murray told the story of how he noticed some exemplary service at P.F. Chang's at the Atlanta airport, and he decided he wanted to be part of the crew. Murray filled out an application and apparently got the job, according to P.F. Chang's Twitter account. An employee of the Atlanta airport's P.F. Chang's reportedly said that Bill Murray is a regular, but there's no word if Murray has decided to accept the job offer. It would certainly be a change of pace for the pop culture icon, and I bet he'd clean up in the tips department. I don't blame Bill. We all need a little walking around money to stack on top of our millions of dollars in acting contracts and Ghostbuster royalties. After the stunt, it looks like other actors are getting into the service industry as well for some added publicity. Chief among them is Seth Rogen, who apparently applied at a recreational marijuana store in Santa Monica, and if he doesn't score the job, then there is something seriously wrong with today's job market. In TV news, the massively successful, critically lauded Game of Thrones wrapped its final season in May. But ever since the show took off in popularity a few years ago, HBO has said its plans to make some spin-off shows to further cash in on the craze the show created. The critical and audience reception to the final season has possibly put a dent into HBO's plans. Season 7 and the most recent final Season 8 have been critically disastrous, and some say the show's quality has taken a dip ever since the show began to stray from the books and original author George R.R. Martin stepped away from the showrunner writing position. Basically, it's not the best of times to be a Game of Thrones fan right now, but HBO doesn't know it. Even still, they commissioned a pilot starring Naomi Watts and immediately canned it and started a new spin-off. This one is helmed by George R.R. Martin himself and follows everyone's favorite crazy dragon family, the Targaryens, and takes place 300 years before the events of Game of Thrones. So if you're a Game of Thrones fan, this is good news. You'll be back to backstabbing dragons and incest in no time. In movie news, Delta Airlines is under fire from film directors after it was discovered that some airlines have censored same-sex love scenes in the Elton John biopic Rocket Man and the high school comedy Booksmart. Booksmart director Olivia Wilde was watching her film on a flight and noticed that those scenes, among others, censorships of words specific to female sexuality, were mysteriously missing. Censorship on flights is nothing new, as anyone who tried to drown out the snoring of the person in the aisle next to them will tell you, but Wilde and others noted that there is no censorship of straight relationships or love scenes in similar movies. Delta says it did not order edits of the film, and they have the choice to purchase edited films from a third party, but were under the impression there were no omissions. They say that the catalog is going to be fixed in the future, but this begs the question, what else has been censored from Delta flights? We paid for a ticket to answer just that, and the results were striking. Here's a shot from Silence of the Lambs. They even censored Sesame Street, removing all the scenes with Bert and Ernie. Now, in other music news, Grease star Olivia Newton-John had an auction for some of her gear from the famous 1978 film that sold for a ridiculous amount of money. It's all right, though, because all of the proceeds went to her breast cancer charity. Most of the items were clothing from the movie sold to people that were clearly hopelessly devoted Grease fans, including the leather pants that nobody on earth can fit into and a pink ladies' jacket with Sandy embroidered on it. But what stole the show was the leather jacket from the end of the film. The jacket sold for a whopping $405,000, double the auction estimate. If you think that's been an absurd amount of money for a jacket, tell me about it, stud. In ridiculous sports news, the Patriots finally lost. In other ridiculous sports news, Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson took a foot to the face in a nasty injury during last week's game against the Raiders. While people doubted his likeness to return in yesterday's eventual win over the Jaguars because of this injury, Watson silenced the doubters by passing for 201 yards while clearly still reeling from the previous week's injury. So how did he do it? Shaking off a bad eye injury is no small feat. So what's Watson's secret to getting back in the game? According to him, it was chicken sandwich fast food retailer Popeyes and their spicy chicken sandwich that helped him regain his wisdom and vision to overcome the injury. In an interview after the game, Watson credited the sandwich, which has just today hit stores across the country, with his quick return. We weren't able to get our hands on the sandwich, so we cannot confirm or deny whether it does have healing properties, but it's safe to say that Deshaun Watson will be cashing a big paycheck from Popeyes sometime soon. That's going to do it for the news this week. Stay tuned for Tom Hamilton's In Case You Missed It segment, and don't go anywhere because we have some bits from our crew. Keep it locked right here to Good Night.
So, today is National Candy Day, but it is also National Stress Awareness Day. So, I'm going to do my two favorite things, eating candy and telling you why I'm so stressed. And also, hopefully, give you some ways to reduce that stress. Let's get to it.
Ways to reduce stress. Eat a bunch of crap. It's really not good for you. Say hi to my dog. I love my dog. I just am an immature adult. I just ignore all the problems in my life and just kind of say they'll resolve themselves. Student loan payments, those don't exist.
No. So I'm going to give you some actual stress reduction tips because this video needs to be somewhat informative and Cameron didn't do a very good job. So how do I reduce stress? Exercise. Exercise is a huge thing. Get out there, go for a run. This is very... Go outside, go for a run, lift some weights, do some yoga. Yoga is fantastic for stress reduction. You can feel the knots that you build up either in your back, under your chin, or something like that. And just giving a massage or something like that really helps. Spending some time with your pet is a great one. Getting off social media is a great one too. Because as much as we love social media here at Good Night, we have a whole segment devoted to social media. It can be a little bit toxic sometimes. So taking the time to unplug is usually a really good thing. And finally, meditate. Meditating is one of the hardest things to do, but it's so beneficial for your stress. Do some deep breathing and let it all out. That's what works for me, and it's worked for a lot of other people, but I know there's some dietary supplements you can take if you're feeling really stressed. And don't be afraid to reach out and get help if you feel a little bit overwhelmed, because there are people in your life who care about you. So here on National Candy Day, National Stress Awareness Day, we want to tell you that it's okay to be stressed, but it's also okay to eat candy. So do both. Also, the best way to overcome some stress is to eat a whole lot of candy. Just eat some candy, all your stuff will go away. Every last bit of it. Want to trick or treat for Halloween? Go eat some candy. It reduces stress. Or have a good time here on Good Night. And we'll be right back.
I'm feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. I've lost what I was seeking. Sea of problems crashed into you again. I'm an island, keeping out of reach, sinking under me. Don't bother saving me, saving me. I'm feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring done. I've lost what I was seeking. I'm feeling so far, feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. I've lost what I was seeking. Feeling so far, feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. Lost what I was seeking. Feeling so far, feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. I've lost what I was seeking.
Hello, and welcome to the third week of In Case You Missed It, where I briefly go over the most popular releases of last week in movies and TV. I'm your host, the Stud Muffin Tom Cruise, and let's get started right away with movies. On November 1st, Terminator Dark Fate was released in the theaters in the United States. Directed by Timothy Miller, it features a cast of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, Arnold Schwarzenegger as T-800/Carl, Mackenzie Davis as Grace, and Natalia Reyes as Danny Ramos. Like the other Terminator movies, the plot focuses on protecting someone from a scary Terminator from the future. In this case, Sarah Connor and a T-800 that has taken the name Carl are begrudgingly working together alongside Grace, a super soldier from the future, to protect Danny Ramos from a Rev-9, a scary new Terminator from the future. So far, Terminator Dark Fate has grossed a worldwide total of $123.6 million, debuting to $29 million and finishing number one in the box office this weekend. The movie has a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critic consensus saying it is an upgrade over its immediate predecessors, though it isn't as great as the franchise's best installments. For me, the Terminator movies have almost become their own genre. Whether it's better or worse than previous installments is irrelevant so long as it adapts the Terminator formula well, which it does. Fans of previous Terminator movies will love it, and if you're new to the franchise, give it a watch, because the action and thrilling nature of two killing machines duking it out on the protagonist and antagonist side has always been a formula for success. Go watch it. It's good. Moving on, also released on November 1st was Harriet, directed by Casey Lemons. The cast features Cynthia Erivo as Harriet Tubman, Leslie Odom Jr. as William Still, Joe Alwyn as Gideon Brodus, and Clark Peters as Ben Ross. The film is a biographical story about Harriet Tubman, an abolitionist and former slave who led hundreds of people to freedom in the Underground Railroad. So far, the film has grossed a domestic total of $12 million and has not been released to international audiences. As such, it also debuted to $12 million, finishing fourth on the box office this weekend under Terminator, Joker, and Maleficent. Harriet received a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics saying it is a sincere tribute to a pivotal figure in American history, but is frustratingly formulaic in its approach to the story. Well, I say the formula exists for a reason, critics. Sure, the movie isn't innovative, but it tells the story it sets out to tell, and the acting performances and cinematography will keep you engaged until the end. Moving on to television, I have some exciting news. Last week, on November 1st, Apple launched their new on-demand streaming service, Apple TV+. And with that launch comes a lot of new shows. So this week's selection of TV shows will have some of the shows I'm looking forward to watching the most on Apple TV+. So, keeping with the theme of American historical figures, let's jump right into Apple TV's new show, Dickinson. Released alongside the launch of the platform on November 1st, Dickinson is about the great American historical writer and poet, Emily Dickinson. The show is a coming-of-age tale that explores gender inequality, society, and family in one woman's quest to become a great writer. And if you think you recognize the actress that plays Emily, it's because you probably do. The show stars Haley Steinfeld as Emily, who I personally recognize as Petra from Ender's Game, but is also well known for her role as Charlie in the movie Bumblebee. The cast also features Adrian Ensko as Austin Dickinson, Anna Baryshnikov as Lavinia Dickinson, and Jane Krakowski as Mrs. Dickinson. The show has a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics saying it is audacious, but its bold blend of period drama and millennial milieu may not be for everyone. And if you're like me and need a translation for what millennial milieu means, it basically means that the show is modernized somewhat to appeal more to millennials despite being set in the 1800s, which I personally think is a good thing, but to each their own. Moving on to the next show, released alongside the launch of Apple TV Plus on November 1st, is the new show For All Mankind. The show is an alternate what-if scenario exploring what would have happened if the space race never ended and the Soviets were the first to land on the moon, not the United States. The main cast features Jodie Balfour as Ellen Waverly, Michael Dorman as Gordo Stevens, Ren Schmidt as Margot Madison, and Sonia Walger as Molly Cobb. The show has a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics saying that it has an impressive vision for alternate history and has a lot of potential. I personally am a little bit of a space nerd, so I'm seriously considering getting Apple TV Plus just for this show. If you're like me and you like space, I bet we're going to love this show. So we've got one more show to cover before the end of tonight's episode of In Case You Missed It, but there are a lot of other shows that came out on Apple TV Plus this week, and I unfortunately do not have time to cover them all. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round of shows that you should check out on your own. The Morning Show, featuring Jennifer Aniston exploring the cutthroat world of morning news. See, featuring Jason Momoa, about a future where mankind has lost the ability to see and must communicate in different ways, which is all good and fine until a set of twins is born with sight, challenging the status quo. And Truth Be Told, a criminal investigative series featuring Octavia Spencer that explores the philosophy of justice. There are plenty more shows on Apple TV, so be sure to go check them out for yourself. Moving on to our last show of the day, also released on November 1st, was Amazon Prime Video's Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan Season 2, and boy is that a mouthful. The show is a political thriller based on characters from Tom Clancy's Ryanverse. The show follows Jack Ryan, a CIA analyst who leaves the safety of his desk to go out into the field after discovering a series of dubious bank transfers. By Season 2, Jack Ryan is caught up in political warfare in a fictionalized Venezuela suffering an economic meltdown, much to the dislike of Venezuela's real-life government. So if you watch the show, remember that it is fiction and does not reflect real-life Venezuela. It probably doesn't need to be said, but in case you've been living under a rock since 2005, the main character, Jack Ryan, is played by John Krasinski, who should be universally recognized as Jim from The Office. The show also features Wendell Pierce as James Greer, John Hugenacker as Mattis, and Abby Cornish as Kathy Mueller. The show has an overall score of 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics praising Krasinski's performance as Jack Ryan, saying that he plays the character very naturally and makes him more relatable. If you're a fan of political thrillers with a good dose of action, this show will be right down your alley. That'll do it for this week's installment of In Case You Missed It. Be sure to tune in next week for this week's most popular releases in movies and TV. I'm your host, the Stud Muffin Tom Cruise, and keep it locked to good night.
Hey everybody, that's going to do it for another edition of Good Night. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Good Night.